Today's meditation, as I mentioned, is one of our quarterly meditations, which is going to be grounded in principles of 12-step recovery, Jewish tradition, and Jewish mindfulness meditation. It's co-sponsored with the Jewish Addiction Awareness Network, and I'm always so happy to introduce Marla Kaufman, the founder of JAAN, director of JAAN, just to say a few words about the really important work that they do in lifting up the issue of addiction in the Jewish community. So I can send it over to you, Marla, for a few minutes.
Well, thank you, Mark. I always want to start by saying how grateful I am to IJS and Mark and all the tech people, including Jet today, for doing these recovery meditations every quarter. The next ones, that we've got 2 more this year, are going to be on September 21st and December 7th. So you might want to note those in your calendar. Also, I encourage you to go to our website, where we have a lot of resources and a lot of very interesting reading about recovery in Judaism and how they intersect, as well as follow all of our social media, which is educational, really bringing to the forefront whatever's happening in the recovery world, whatever's happening with the addiction epidemic, whether that be a substance use disorder or other behavioral addictions. And then I just want to say how excited I am, Mark, that you've chosen the 3rd step today to focus on. I'm grateful that Judaism allows us to see God in different ways and to wrestle with God and to evolve our relationship with God. There's so many Hebrew words for God in our tradition, and so many attributes, and so many stories of how our ancestors have interacted with the divine. And I'm looking forward to hearing you today and experiencing your teaching. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Marlon. Thanks for all the work, and we're so grateful for this partnership. As I mentioned in the days leading up to this sit, although it is a meditation that is specifically designed to lift up principles of 12-step recovery, it's really about also the place of the intersection between some of those principles and what we find within Jewish tradition and within the principles of Jewish mindfulness meditation. So I want to try to lift that up and lead us into a little bit of practice today to experience that in our own lives. And as with all our offerings, you have to test it out, as our friend Rabbi Sam Feinsmith likes to say. Don't take my word for it. Try it in your own experience, and hopefully it will be applicable to your own life and your own experience. So this week, as it happens, the Torah portion, at least outside in the diaspora outside of Israel, is Shlach Lecha. And very briefly, the nutshell of that Torah portion that I want to lift up for us is that it describes the story of the Meraglim, the spies or scouts that are sent by Moses to check out the land of Israel, the promised land that the Israelites are intended to enter. And really, just in the nutshell, of course, there are 12 spies who go out and check out the land for 40 days and 40 nights and come back. They're charged by Moses with simply finding out facts. They're on a fact-finding reconnaissance mission. What's the nature of the land? Who lives there? Etc. They're not expected or charged with coming back with their opinions about the nature of the land, or what's the best way to get there, or how the Israelites should handle it. Just the facts. So when they come back, again, nutshell version, 10 of the spies say it's a good land, it's a great land, and there's a big but that they introduce. They use the Hebrew phrase as FS key. They say it's a good land, beautiful land, flowing with milk and honey, etc. But, and then they describe the challenges, the powerful people who dwell in the land. And there's a process by which the little bit of anxiety in the people who are hearing this report are feeling when they hear that report begins to spin out of control into a full-blown panic attack. And the only 2 of the 12 spies, Caleb and Joshua, who say, yes, it is going to be challenging, but we can do it, that God is with us and we will be able to do it. And of course, it's because of this incident that the Israelites wind up having the consequence of their panic attack is that they are going to wander in the midbar, in the wilderness, and they will not be able to enter the promised land because of their inability to trust in the process, basically. And it will be the next generation, the generation perhaps that is not as scarred by the trauma of enslavement, that will be able to enter into the promised land. So the Torah portion this week raises this question of how we, on a secular level, really, how do we deal with our anxieties? How do we deal with the reality that we can't control the outcome? How do we deal with the fact that we are not, in fact, rulers of the universe and in charge of every detail, when there are aspects of our personalities and selves that really have a very difficult time accepting that reality? How do we, in language that might be resonant for people in recovery or familiar with recovery, how do we turn our will and our lives over to the care of a power that is greater than ourselves, bigger than ourselves, and trust that we will be okay? And that's really the topic for today. So I'm going to just share briefly a few texts, and then we'll move into our practice. Thanks, Jet, for sharing the link to this text. You can follow on the screen, or if you prefer on your own screen, or just reference it later. So I shared the biblical grounding for our practice today of putting ourselves in the shoes of those spies, the Meraglim, or putting ourselves in the shoes of the Israelites, listening to the report of the spies who have come back from checking out the land, and hearing the voices of Joshua and Caleb, which say this is going to be hard and challenging, but if we have enough faith and trust in ourselves and in God, we can get there. Versus the voice of the 12 scouts and say it's impossible, we can't do it. This is and the consequent sense of expanding and deepening anxiety and panic. So step three of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, which of course have been adapted for use in recovery programs for all kinds of addictions, is considered a linchpin of recovery, and a challenging one for many. The step 3 says, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God. So as Marla mentioned earlier, one of the things that is hopefully makes this an accessible step for people is that it leaves open the definition of God and to the individual. However you understand, whatever God is for you, that is fine. What the key of here is the willingness to make a decision to release control, to let go of control, and to trust, shall we say, the universe, to trust life itself, to be able to live in the flow of life and history without grasping, without clinging, without holding on to the illusion that we can or even should control every aspect of life, and that we can be okay if we acknowledge, first of all, just acknowledge that we can't control, and that we can allow someone or something else. For some people, turning our will and our lives over to the care of God simply means being willing to trust another human being who can be our guide and say, well, I can't, I seem not to be able to be making any progress in changing my behavior based on my decision making and my will. Maybe this person who has experience and has been successful in making a change in their life, maybe I should listen to them and trust them. So for some people, the God of their understanding might be, for example, the recovery group, or a trusted guide or mentor or teacher or relative or friend, to say, you know what, I'm going to let you drive. I'm going to let you drive the car for a while, and I'll sit in the passenger seat. So that's kind of the upshot of step 3. Putting this in Jewish terms, later in the Torah, in the book of Exodus, we get this passage where this is when Moses is really ratcheting up the beauty of his rhetoric in his farewell address to the Israelites before he dies. And he's speaking to the generation, in fact, not to the generation of the spies, but to their children, the next generation that's preparing to enter into the promised land, and says, Va'ata Yisrael, ma Adonai Elohecha shoel me'imach. And now, Israel, what does the Holy One your God ask of you? Only this, ki'im, to revere, to be in yirah, to be in awe of the Holy One your God, to walk in God's paths, to love God, and to serve the Holy One your God with all your heart and soul. This is the essence of the charge to the Jewish people. Pretty simple, says Moses. You can boil it down to this. Maintain a sense of reverence for something greater than yourself. Revere the Holy One your God. Walk in God's paths. Try to follow the way that you can discern God, the universe, is inviting you to walk. Love that path and live a life of avodah, of serving that greater, larger cause, that greater, higher power with all your heart, with all your soul. The classic commentator, medieval commentator Rashi says about that verse, points out that there's a teaching in the Talmud that is grounded in that biblical verse, that everything is in the hands of heaven. Hakol bidei shamayim. Everything is in the hands of heaven. We really are not in control. The only thing that is within our control, chutz miyirat hashamayim, the only thing that's within our control is our attitude towards life and maintaining a sense of, here it's translated as fear, but I would prefer reverence of God. Reverence of God. That's really the quality. I had thought today we would focus on bitachon and trust, but really this has to do with awareness of the infinite greatness of something beyond ourselves, letting go of our small self, of the ego, and picking up on the teaching from Rabbi Sam Feinsmith last week, right? Of living in a state of expanded consciousness rather than constricted consciousness. And one more Jewish text from the Musar, great Musar teacher of the late 18th, early 19th century, Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Satnov, in his Cheshbon HaNefesh. And this is going to be part of our instruction for practice in a moment. He teaches, if worry comes to your heart, when you're feeling anxious, take it as a warning from God who loves you. Worry can be a gift. He describes it as a warning, but it's just a signal from a loving God when you feel anxious. Examine your deeds, take counsel with those who advise you, and when you have fulfilled God's will, trust God and your serenity will return. Transform anxiety into serenity. The Serenity Prayer, which was in its original form written by the theologian Reinhold Niebuhr, I think encapsulates this, and let it be our guide into practice now. And if you are in a position to say it out loud, and if you're interested in saying it out loud, I invite you to join me in reciting this prayer together as a kind of kavanah or intention for our sit. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Your will, not mine, be done. So let's find a position for our meditation together, whatever position is comfortable for you. And the only key here is to find a position, whether you're sitting or standing or laying down, that's comfortable, but enables you to be alert and awake, and that affords you some kavod, some honor, where we honor ourselves, take our seat. Each one of you can take your place of kavod and tiferet, a place of honor and beauty, And as always, you can choose an anchor for your attention to try to keep you connected to the present moment. Whether it's the breath that rises and falls, just following an inhalation, and maybe we can all take 3 deep breaths, just receiving 3 deep breaths deep into the belly and expanding the lungs and feeling the rib cage expand. Dayenu, that would be enough. Those 3 deep breaths. Noticing how that eases anxiety and worry in the body, resets the nervous system. So we can stay with the breath, or if you prefer, you can just anchor your attention in physical sensations, whether it be the sensation of the floor beneath your feet, or the chair that you're sitting on, or the backrest, physical sensation of the contact with whatever's supporting your body right now, and trusting that support, noticing what it feels like to trust the support. And one other possible anchor could just be the ambient sounds, the soundscape of your space right now. Whether it's the buzz of your appliance or sounds from the street or from nature. We're just attuning ourselves. We're attending to what is true right now in our bodies, in our breath, in the space in which we're sitting. And we'll move into silence, staying with that anchor. And when the mind and attention drifts away, just when you catch yourself, just bring yourself back with a lot of love and kindness and compassion, as if you would take the hand of a toddler who's wandered off to bring them back to the sidewalk without yanking your attention back, just lovingly, gently coming back again and again. And the invitation is to notice anxiety as it shows up in our bodies, in our breath, in our mind. Take that anxiety as a signal from a God who loves you, a God who's there to say, it's okay, I got this. And one final bit of instruction or suggestion is that if your hands are resting in your lap, you turn them upwards so that the palms are facing up in a more vulnerable, receptive mode. Opening ourselves to the support of that loving God. So that we are practicing serenity. Grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change. And let's sit together for another 5 minutes in silence. For the last 2 minutes of our sit together, we are practicing releasing, letting go of control, letting go of control of others, letting go of control of our lives, because in this moment, we can't really change anything. In this moment, can accept it just as it is. So I'm inviting you to notice any tension of clenching or clinging in your body, and as you breathe, just to release, maybe soften the muscles of the face, on the jaw, all the places in the body where there's the tension that comes from thinking we need to fix everything, we need to control everything. Just to set it all down for a moment. As we close, you're invited to join me if you'd like, again, in the words of the Serenity Prayer, again, with the hands facing up, open, allowing the breath to soften the tense and constricted places in the body. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. If your eyes have been closed during a meditation, or your gaze has been softened, I invite you to come back to the group and remember our connections to each other. And we'll end our meditation as we do every day by offering those of you who are in mourning or observing a yard site, or if it's your custom to join in the mourner's Kaddish, to do so. And if you would like to put the name or names of those you're honoring in the chat box now or after we recite Kaddish, I invite you to do so. And thanks to Jet for sharing the words of the Kaddish on the screen. If you're reciting the Kaddish, I invite you to join me by rising in body or in spirit, and you can unmute at this time. And if you're not reciting Kaddish, then I invite you to please stay present for those who are. Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Yalma, Dibra, Shmei,
Adala
Amen.
Amen.
And friends, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to thank Louisa Freilich Aviv for sponsoring our practice in loving memory of your devoted parents, Edith and Edward Freilich, Zichronam Livracha. May their memories be a blessing. I thank Marla Kaufman and the Jewish Addiction Awareness Network for our partnership for these quarterly recovery meditations. Want to acknowledge Rabbi Elon Glazer of Our Jewish Recovery, which is a Facebook group and a wonderful resource for those in the Jewish community who are in recovery or family of members of those in recovery. And thank Jet Bachman, as always, for holding our tech space beautifully today. So thank you for that. Friends, those of you who are leaving us now, just a reminder that Sarah Waxman of At the Well will lead us in practice tomorrow, as she always does, on or around Rosh Chodesh. In this case, Rosh Chodesh doesn't begin until Sunday night. The new month of Tammuz, or it's a 2-day Rosh Chodesh, starts Sunday night. So it will be on Monday and Tuesday. We're not meeting on Monday because of in honor of Juneteenth, but we'll be back with our live sets next Tuesday through Friday. And as always, you're invited to stay on for some conversation. In this case, I'll respond to any questions or reflections that you'd like to share in the chat. If you'd like to remain and just continue sitting, you're welcome to do that as well. I'd like to end and before we conclude with another short set that I didn't get to, with some material I didn't get to include in the half hour, in our usual half hour. So I'll keep an eye on the chat and welcome any questions. I'll scroll, see if any questions are any, but feel free to put questions in the chat. You can preface it by writing question. I'll take a look. Okay. All right. Lori writes, step 3 is toughest for me of all 12. I'm comfy turning my life over to universal globe, but cannot reconcile turning my will over it to a willful. I'm not sure if hit is God, or Lori, maybe you can help me out there. Makes no sense and seems irresponsible to not contribute my will to the world around me. So I guess that's a great question. Thank you for sharing that, Lori. Turning over our will. I think the Serenity Prayer captures this kind of paradox, really, of recognizing reality that the world, universe does not operate according to our will, but that we are also meant to be engaged agents in changing ourselves and the world by taking action. So, and the story in the Torah of the Israelites making their way into the promised land is an example of that. It isn't just that, it requires effort, a lot of effort on their part and their will. But the question is how to discern how, and I guess this is a question of trust or a sense of experience. And again, everyone has to test it on their own experience, whether there is a sense of a directionality within the universe that we can tap into in some way and align what we identify as our will with that will, and to always be testing to what extent is my will reflective of my own construction of self, and to what extent is it being guided and shaped by, or a conduit for that that will, so that when things, when I think in recovery speak, people often will say something like, one takes actions and then turns over the results, right? Which is to say, we don't know how things are going to turn out. So there's a willingness to surrender there. So I don't know, that's the best I can do on that. And Laura, why do you think God would send a signal by way of anxiety to loved ones? Okay, so I was, thanks for that too, Laura. I was kind of adding my own gloss on that one. I don't know that I would use the word, why would God send a signal by way of anxiety? Well, I guess, we have our own. Anxiety is not something that we welcome. It's a state that I think we may have a judgment about in ourselves and in others. But like all feelings, has the capacity to be our teacher. And I think that's how I understand that teaching, is that everything can be our teacher. All feelings can be our teachers, including our anxiety. And that rather than repressing that anxiety or powering through that anxiety by acknowledging it, it can become actually the springboard to serenity. So that's how I understand that quote. So like, oh, you feel anxious? Notice that and allow that anxiety to melt. The anxiety is an opportunity to release, to practice reverence, to practice trust, and to move into a greater state of ease. It's not a punishment. It's not a, something bad about you. In fact, we can recognize that anxiety and fear are implanted within us as a way of protecting ourselves. Without it, we would be vulnerable. It serves a purpose. Question is, how do we use it in a way? So, for example, the responses of Jacob and Joshua and Caleb, I think, are instructive here as well. It's not that they don't feel anxious. They said there's reason to be anxious, but we can manage it. We can deal with this. Whereas the 10 other voices, which are by far the majority, are saying, no, 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 can't handle it, can't handle it. And so the anxiety spirals out of control into this full-blown panic attack by the people. So the question is, how do we do that? How do we attend to that voice of Joshua and Caleb that says, yeah, it's okay, you're going to be okay? And I like the idea of a loving God saying in the phrase, that we know from our teacher Sylvia Boorstein, sweetheart, it's going to be okay. Sweetheart, you're okay. We don't, many of us who have not experienced a sense within Jewish tradition that that's the voice of God speaking. But that is the voice of God that speaks, I think, through that teaching, and also in recovery, where the principle, one of the 12 traditions, is that the only sole authority is a loving God. And we have that within our tradition. We have the idea of a loving God who's basically saying, it's not that you shouldn't be anxious, but let the anxiety be a signal to you that that you're not alone. Every time I feel anxious, it may be from this sense of, oh, it's because of me, and I'm all alone. It's all on me, and I can't trust anyone else. So like, no, remember to trust. Remember, you have support. You have friends. You have family. You have mentors. You have sponsor. You have people that you can count on, and you hopefully can develop a sense of a higher power, however you want to understand that higher power, in which you can trust. And so anxiety is just like a little reminder of that. So like, oh, you feel some anxiety? Remember to come back to that. So let me add this, which is, in a moment, I want to invite us to sit for the last 3 minutes together with the song Kol Haolam Kulo, Gesher Tzar Mahod. All the world is a narrow bridge. And the principle is not to fear at all. That's a teaching attributed to Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, the great Hasidic master. His actual words are not the words in the song itself, as in the popular version that's usually sung, but it's actually the teaching that is reported for Rabbi Nachman is. So shelo yitpached. It's not that shelo lefached is what's usually taught and what is in the lyrics of the song. The whole world is a narrow bridge, and the ha'ikar, the principle lo lefached klal, is to not fear at all. But his actual teaching is shelo yitpached klal, that one which is the reflexive, meaning that the main thing is not to let your fear, not to fan the flames of your own anxiety and fear, not to freak out, but to be able to have your fear and not frighten yourself more so. So it's very much in keeping with Rabbi Nachman's teaching that the goal here is not to be fear-free. The goal here is to have fear be part of our lives and anxiety is part of our lives, but to cultivate our ability, our capacity for trust. And for many of us, of course, that capacity for trust is damaged in families of origin or through intergenerational trauma. We come by it honestly. Pretty much all of us, we come by. The anxiety is it's kind of in the water for many of us. So our spiritual task, is to recognize that and not to double down, and not to judge ourselves for having that anxiety, and also not to feed the voices of the 10 Meraglim, the 10 spies that are slowly but surely feeding that voice that says, no, 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 this is going to be a disaster. But to hear the other voices that say, we're okay, you're okay, you're okay. And the theory here in terms of recovery and any kind of compulsive or obsessive behaviors is that if we can feed that voice, I'm going to be okay, that the compulsions, the obsessions, the addictions will have a little less power over us. And that if we can trust life and overcome that kind of trauma-induced anxiety. Okay, I see there's now a lot of questions. Okay, so let's end with this for the last 2 minutes. So I want to invite us to, again, come back to a position to practice together. Let's close with this. And I'm going to play kind of a contemplative version of that popular song, Kol Ha'olam Kulo, Gesher Tsar Ma'od. And I wanted to just invite you to let the words, the melody wash over you in the same way that we were sitting with the Serenity Prayer, to allow that inner voice of Joshua and Caleb that are saying to the people, life is hard. This is hard. This is hard, and we are not alone, and we are going to be okay. And there are sources of support, and you can do this, and we can do this. So that's the voice, I think, of Joshua and Caleb, who, of course, are of that generation, are the only two who do make it to the promised land. In fact, one of them leads the people into it. So let's sit, and I'll play the song, and then we'll close together. Thanks so much again, everyone, for being with us today.
גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד, כל העולם כולו, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד, כל העולם כולו, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר Ve'arika
Friends, thanks for joining us today. Again, thanks to Marla Kaufman and the Jewish Addiction Awareness Network. Thanks, Louisa, for sponsoring our practice today. Thanks to Jet for holding our space. Thanks to each of you for being here. I put the link to the version of Ko'olam Kalo in the chat. I'll put it one more time here. Maybe keep the room open for a moment so people have a chance to get that link. Blessing to be with you today. We hope to see you tomorrow for an opportunity to practice with Sarah Waxman at the Well and to move into Shabbat together and to say goodbye to the month of Sivan and move into the month of Tammuz together.